Hello, our Bridging the Gap family. It is a new year with the same team here with Bridging the Gap. I am your host, Andrew Nicastro, chief streamographer, but more importantly, as always, family member to many veterans, one of which right here next to me,
Hi,
Brother Dave.
Back. David, hello.
And our sister from another mister. I always say that. Miss
I
V,
like it.
Mrs. V.
I like
Chipperini. Yeah. And as a reminder to why we're here today, we are here to quiet the stigma of PTS and mental illness. And we do this by storytelling. We do that through relationship building. And then we also do that through education about the resources and what's available to our veterans. And we took a little bit of a break there, I would say. We were just talking about this October.
A little bit.
Yeah.
I just,
You know.
you don't have to do one every month, even though we love the veterans. And sometimes things get in the way. We kind of went outside of the structure and just poured into the family. And
Life
that's okay,
happens.
too. Life happens.
Life
yeah.
happens, and I think
Yeah.
that goes to speak with the group and the individuals that we also serve by doing this podcast is to
right.
kind of just remind them that we are also humans too, and life does happen for us, and sometimes it is okay to take that pause and take care
right.
of business back home and
Right.
do
I
what we have
needed
to
it.
do.
Yeah, but
I'll admit
But we
that
were
I
grouped.
needed it.
We were grouped just like anyone does, and military
Yeah.
people and veterans. And so in the regrouping, we still want to put up a slide of resources that my buddy Angus behind the curtain is going to put up. So if you want to get in touch with us, somebody in the last month has recently wrote an email. There it is up there. It's the longest email in the world, or I think we're second on the list of the longest one in the world. So please, Bridging the Gap, vetspodcast@gmail.com. Andrew will not make it smaller, so you have to actually pause the slide and copy that, and then write us an email. It comes right to the three of us, and I did contact that other man. We have the Gloucester Veteran Services. The number is up there. Call V, call her team. She will connect you, any question you have. If you want to go to a retreat, I'm the only veteran who's done it in Gloucester or this area. Look up there. Female vets, male vets. You get a whole scholarship to New York, a beautiful retreat center, or down in Jupiter Beach, which is next to West Palm. Look at those dates. Go. I'm talking hotel on the water down in Florida, or
Nice.
upstate New York on a beautiful plot of land, and you're getting everything taken care of. You'll get an education on moral wounds, moral injury, post-traumatic stress, everything. Your spouses can come, and you just learn and you heal in community, and that's what we want is community.
Can the spouses come for the female retreats? Do spouses
Yes.
typically come for that?
I've never seen a male spouse at the female retreats. No, it's usually
Right.
just the females doing
Just
it
the
together.
females. Okay.
But
That's-
all the other
that's
ones
good.
I have seen spouses at there.
Okay.
The most recent retreat, a female came without her vet. The
Angus,
vet
you
was
can remove the
struggling
slide, by the
so
way.
Oh, the spouse came.
So he was from Texas. He was in a terrorist bombing, and he just couldn't come. And that's usually most of us don't commit to healing. He stayed in Texas, and they said, then you come. And she got her healing as a spouse at a
That's
veteran retreat. How
amazing.
amazing is that?
That's amazing.
Yep, agreed.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So
And
please,
even in this
veterans.
podcast, we've interviewed a number of individuals that you brought on because they
right.
were at these retreats.
That's right. Secondary trauma means when we vets come back and we're struggling with our post-traumatic stress and everything we go along with, we're passing it down to wives, family members, children. And so they need a place to also heal.
Absolutely.
And retreat centers usually will bring families around the
Absolutely.
healing. And I love that this one does that. So,
Yeah.
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 Which actually is a perfect segue as to what we as a team kind of discussed talking about with the start of the new year here.
Right.
And we took a break and regrouped for a reason because among everything else going on in life, we were quickly entering the holidays. You know, Thanksgiving to Christmas
Yeah.
to New Year's, it is a stretch. And even as a civilian with, a litter of kids and my wife and everything, it's nuts for a civilian. But then as I was reflecting on this regrouping period and thinking about my brother and sister here, I was like, the holiday season must be unique and it must have its own,
Yeah.
I'll say, challenges. Obviously, there's a lot of beauty to it. We love the holiday season,
absolutely.
right? But then I was actually putting myself in your shoes, which is why this whole conversation about this podcast came up. I was like, if I was a veteran at home, and I'm thinking of some of my best friends now, but they might be overseas
Right.
serving.
Right.
how would I feel knowing they're still in a conflict?
Right.
And I'm here just celebrating.
It's a great question. When we are active duty and we're in a active duty war zone or we're in a combat zone, what does it feel like for us over there with our families back home? And then we have to communicate with them. So there's sat phones, there was Skype originally, but now you have access to everything. What does it feel like for me and V and all of those while we're over there, watching them do Christmas, watching them do holidays?
Yeah.
But also when we come home on an R&R or a leave, and our units are over there, people we love are over there.
How do we
What is
feel?
that? How do we feel? I think that's what we want to talk about today,
Yeah.
and then we'll get into some resources.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
You know, veterans,
Yeah.
how do we connect to it?
That's funny you mentioned Skype. I remember, and it was actually Isaiah who was in the other room as being a stud that he is. I remember there was one holiday. It must have been Christmas actually,
Yep.
where I was over the house with you all, and you were Skyping Isaiah.
Right.
And I can remember being like, "Oh man, this is like heartbreaking."
I had just come
that's
off a
hard.
mission. I had come out of the Humvee, went into my room, and I knew I had to talk to them, and I had my stuff on still. I'm talking, I just took off my Kevlar, but I still had my my bullet bouncer. I still had all my stuff on me, and just to talk to him. And my son Isaiah got out of school early today. He's on the other side of the curtain, so he's watching it live. But it was him that was on the screen.
Yeah.
And you just see that as family. They're just watching everything, you know, and
Yeah.
it's very difficult. I would say for me, it was. I'll be honest. I could leave you all day long, Andrew, when I'm overseas. My mom. I didn't have the same
Sure.
feel. I don't mean like that.
I know exactly what you're saying.
No.
It was hard to leave my kids.
Exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
It's hard to leave the
understandably.
kids.
Right. It's a different.
Understandably.
It's a
Right.
different bond for
Right.
sure.
Yes.
Right.
I mean, I always
Don't mean to
remember
leave
that
you all
being
day
like
long.
Yeah,
a
me
lonely
specifically,
feeling,
dude.
like during the
Yeah,
holidays. I
yeah.
always felt alone. Although I was amongst brothers and sisters, I was amongst peers, and you know, when I was in Iraq, an entire platoon full of friends.
Yeah.
I still felt alone, right? Sitting in the chow hall, having Thanksgiving dinner. I honestly don't remember Christmas. I feel as if I might have just locked myself away in my barracks room, did
Yeah.
my job whenever I was on call, and then went back and went to my bunk and hid out in my bunk. I maybe slept through it. I really don't remember the Christmas holiday whatsoever.
Yeah.
But I
Wow.
specifically remember Thanksgiving and QRF, so Quick Reaction Force. So we were not, when we were in Iraq, we were not part of the company. We were a platoon separated from the company in the middle of downtown, in the middle of a downtown police station, and we did everything. We did the security, we did the training, we did everything.
Yeah.
So it was on us to train, run the facility, and still respond to the neighborhood, the immediate area if something happened. And so Quick Reaction Force was the team that was assigned to go pick up mail and pick up chow from the other base nearby. And so I remember in particular that just happened to be a National Guard unit that was attached to us, and they went and picked up chow. And I remember that the cook that just happened to know how to cook in the unit made us a full Thanksgiving
Wow.
spread dinner so that we can feel as if
Yeah.
we were back home. And I think they even had like the sparkling apple cider put aside
Remember
for
how
us.
much that meant, though?
It really did.
Just that little bit of great food that you would have had
Yeah.
back in America,
And
you
we
have
didn't,
there.
yeah, we didn't go
So
into the
good.
chow hall. We ate this in
Uh-huh.
our barracks. But
Yep.
I remember, you know, our leadership putting up plastic tables everywhere, forcing us to eat in the common spaces so
Yeah.
that we would feel that
right, so you weren't
familyness and
isolated.
feel that togetherness.
Right.
Yeah, but you know, you eat and then you go back into your room
And
and
then
you
you
go back
isolate
into
a little.
isolation
Yeah.
because you're homesick.
Because
You're
you can't,
missing your family.
you're already doing life together in a war zone, but you truly aren't with each other 24/7. If you have, you need space to
Yes.
breathe. It's just when you get stuck in that space and you just keep isolating, which some of them, a small population of them can do that. So during the holidays, like we had mentioned, the one that you were there, I do specifically remember that Christmas. And it was an easy transition, I think, an easier transition when I could leave when they were younger and couldn't talk. When Isaiah could talk, I just remember one memory I have was during Christmas, and I'd come back from a mission, and the Skype was on a phone, and it was being pointed at Isaiah, and I just remember for the first time Isaiah started to being able to communicate, Daddy, I miss you. I don't want you to be over there anymore. The phone started to shake, so I knew his mother was crying. And that one hit me because he could say it now. He could articulate why he was sad and that he missed his dad. And that was Christmas 2013 going into 2014. And 2014 was my last year over there because I felt what he said. And I'm like, wow, I think the transition, I can't stay over here anymore. I have to transition to do something different. That's when I transitioned into the state police. But what it felt like was deep sadness, a pain inside, which is okay to be sad when you miss someone. But what do? Flip the switch. You just feel it for a moment, and then you go on mission
You're
mode.
back on mission mode, right.
Missions, right.
Which, I can understand because you've always communicated that you had, or at least you believed you had to flip that switch.
Yeah.
Because your brothers and sisters over there with you needed you
Not
on
only
point.
did I believe it, I was told it. The first
Yeah.
sergeant said, all right, man, I see that you're crying and losing someone you love, like losing my best friend in Fallujah, that hurts. But, man, do what you got to do, but we got a mission tomorrow, so
Absolutely.
check in. So
Yeah.
it's like
Right.
you're being told by everyone, you can't break down here.
Yep.
You just you do what you got to do, but get ready for tomorrow. So
Yeah.
it's like you're trained to, okay, how do I do this? Get it out, get it out. Stop crying.
Yeah.
And you just put it away to get ready
Yeah.
to do what you got to do.
Yeah, so you just brought up back a huge memory. So my dad had his first stroke while I was in Iraq.
Wow.
And at the time, we didn't have the Skype just yet. We had internet we can chat with, and then we'd have to wait until we were on QRF to then be able to go to the next base, which is once a week, go to the next base and make our phone calls back home. So
Right.
I remember when my dad had his first stroke, my command handed me the satellite because Mom must have put in a Red Cross message, handed me the satellite phone and said, you need to call home, but I need you to be done.
Oof.
And so you call home and
but be done.
you deal, not be done.
wrap
It
my head
wasn't
around that.
necessarily
No, but I know
in
what you
those words,
mean.
but you know how,
Oh,
what
yeah,
it is.
absolutely.
You call back home, you make sure everything is all set back home, but then when you hang up the phone, that's it.
Wire in.
That's right.
You hang
Check
up the
back in.
phone, you check back in with
Yeah.
us. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they allowed me the time to actually speak with my dad. They allowed me the time to speak with my family and do what I needed to do. But the second I hung up with that phone, if I need to take 5 or 10 minutes to regroup, I take 5 or 10 minutes to regroup. But I got to get back on that roof, and I
And
need
V,
to.
does grief have a timeline? Does sadness have a check-in and check-out date now that you've
Yeah.
kind of gone through your process?
No, right.
10 minutes.
Right.
Grieve, cry, be
Do what
done.
you have to do, but be done. I need you back on that roof. Okay.
But
Okay.
that's what we do.
That's
Right.
how we were trained. That's
Right.
how mentally we were reprogrammed to function.
And do you see how hard it is now for veterans to check in and check out in civilian world? Because we're trained in our units to do what V just said. Do what you got to do. Your grief is 10 minutes. Your hurt for your father is 10 minutes. Check back in with us. Get back in on your post. Mentally
Yep.
check in on your guys. It's time to go back
Yep.
to combat and war.
I remember when I was in PLDC. So PLDC is when you go for, your sergeant or whatever, and you have to go through the proper training to actually become a sergeant. So they send you to essentially another level of basic training or a higher level of basic training. So anyway, so I was at PLDC, and I think I had a month left, maybe a few weeks left of completing my training, and my grandmother was not doing well. And Mom again put in a Red Cross message, and I remember my command.
Your mom's really good at that, the Red Cross
Mom
message.
kills
Wow.
me, man. No, but I
didn't know what that-
remember. I remember having that conversation and them telling me, you have two decisions to make. One decision, but you have two options. You can
Right.
either complete your training and whatever happens back home, or you can go home, but you'd have to be recycled and start all over again. What's the decision you make?
You
when
stay
you're
and
a couple
you-
weeks
I
done,
know you gotta go. You
when
stay
you're
for
a
the
couple
mission.
weeks out, and luckily my grandmother did not pass
Right.
then. She passed shortly before I left for Egypt. Actually, she left while we were home on our 4-day before going to Egypt. And so my commander and our leadership was very good about allowing me to stay home through the funeral services and then go back to the platoon. Someone else packed my bag for me.
See all the dynamics. I bring up another dynamic is that I know the Army, when they get deployed, there could be a year and a half to 2 years, and somewhere in the middle they like to give a leave time where you can come home for 2 weeks to 3 weeks to see your family.
4-day pass.
Or for 40 pass, which is not very good. But wow, to check back into the United States, go ahead and be a husband, a dad, whatever a mom, while your unit is still deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. It happened to me. That's one of the most difficult things. Is I did also work for the government, so something was wrong with my diplomatic passport, my visa. So they said, we got to send you back to Washington D.C. It could take 2 to 3 weeks. I was the only one. They sent me back home, and everybody was still in country. I was flipped on to do the mission because I'd already been there a week. I came back home during a holiday season, and I struggled to function and plug back into family life because I was ready for the mission. I was ready for my 90-day contract.
You already flipped that switch.
And I couldn't go to parties, and people looked at me like, dude, like, come on, let's go.
up?
There's a part, and I couldn't do it. I still did it. I felt like a zombie walking around family because I couldn't stop thinking of my guys doing missions. I'm supposed to be there with my guys doing the same missions. It was one of the most difficult times for me because I was still active. I just needed to figure out some paperwork.
It's a constant tug of war, right? You
Yes.
have all of these peers, right? All of these guys overseas that are needing you, right? And you're constantly thinking of how much they need you. But then you have your family and your home life and all these people back home who need you also.
That's right.
And you're in the middle. You're that knot in the middle of that rope that's constantly fighting this battle, mentally fighting this battle of who needs me more? Where do I need to be more? And obviously, when we're on mission mode, our minds are, my service members need me more. My peers need me more. And it's not that you don't care about your family, but you're on mission mode. You can't think of anything else.
That's right. And how
You're
about
almost
that?
in life or death mode, right? Like for your brothers and
For
sisters.
your brothers and sisters,
Yeah,
like what if
yeah.
something happens while you're not there? That's where this survivor's guilt comes from. What if something happens? Something has happened.
That's right. It was part of your testimony.
It was part of my
when
testimony.
you trained a unit.
I left. I cleared orders. I cleared out of the military altogether. And something happened, and
Someone lost their life.
I blamed myself for not being there. And I think that's
survivor's
just the
guilt.
battle that we deal with is just what would have changed if I were there? Would I have noticed a roadside, explosive? Would I have noticed wires sticking out of the middle of the road? Would I have been more hyper-vigilant? We don't know, right? That's the uncertainty of the what ifs.
Right.
But we will always carry that blame with us, right? And I feel like it's the same when you're not there.
Right. I don't
Even if
carry the
you're only-
blame. There was a time I had the survivor's guilt at the retreat centers. We've worked through the traumas of survivor's guilt because I remember your testimony. And I know it's part of my testimony is being home when the guy was wearing a vest. He cacked off, screaming Allah Akbar. He blew up 3 of my guys and like a bunch of other civilians. And it was the largest attack on our base to date. And I just remember being home and then my friends giving me a call while they were home on leave saying this just happened on our base. I had recently just ate lunch with those guys at a table as I was going home. They went to the base and you're now seeing their faces, you know their families. That survivor's guilt is a big one for us. When we know something's happened to our guys, our brothers and sisters on the ground, it hits us because we're so deeply saddened. We even put ourselves in their shoes and say that could have been me. It's so deep rooted, that trauma, that we need it to heal because we don't want to carry the guilt. How do I process through that layer of the onion of trauma and peel back those layers to get to the root of that pain so I don't carry it?
Yeah. I want to hit up on something that we come across often now that you're mentioning that survivor's guilt. We deal with a large population and a large variety of Vietnam and Vietnam era veterans. And a common theme for Vietnam era veterans is I wasn't there. Right. I wasn't in country. Right. And what I always remind them is even if you were not in direct combat or even if you were not in country, your efforts still supported the overall mission.
Absolutely.
Those guys that were in Thailand, those guys that were in Laos, Cambodia, those guys who were stationed
California.
in the Philippines.
They could have been in California.
Germany, you
Yes.
name it. It was still in support of the operations that were
right.
occurring in Vietnam and Southeast Asia. Your service does matter. Your service was just as important.
That's
and it
right.
is natural for you to have that guilt that you live with. And it is okay for you to say, I wasn't there, I get it. But we need you to understand
Yeah.
that you did
You're
serve.
a Vietnam veteran. You're a Vietnam era veteran who did your job to
Yeah.
support the mission. Your country didn't support you. Other facets of America didn't support you when we came home to Vietnam. A lot of them are struggling with post-traumatic
Yes.
stress at the retreats.
Yes.
Because they have survivor's guilt, which is
Yes.
real. They feel because they weren't on the grounds of Vietnam and didn't pull a trigger or didn't, have the dust on their boots, that they're not Vietnam veterans. No, they are Vietnam veterans. They're Vietnam era veterans. And they still were on American soil watching what the country was doing to them. They pulled back and recoiled, and they now have post-traumatic stress, and it's the survivor's guilt version because they feel like they didn't do enough or they didn't put their lives at risk like the guys on the ground. And the post-traumatic stress is hitting them too, and they're also taking their lives. And at the retreat centers, we work on peeling that back, what you just explained.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's another real one.
And this, what I love about the organic style of some of these conversations is what starts with one conversation
Leads into many
organically
others.
shifts to
We
where it's
shifted
supposed
here.
to go to survivor's guilt. This just naturally went in that direction, which I wasn't even thinking about that. But of
Sure.
course, I'm a civilian, so
Sure. We
that's why I
both-
posed
we
the
both
questions.
have that.
Yeah.
As we said, how this started was during the holiday seasons, and we were talking about family. We found ourselves outside of war, remembering what it was like, and then people dying on the ground over there, and we felt that. While no matter where we were in the world, we felt that tangibly. And there are many veterans who either never stepped foot on the soils of the Middle East and people lost their lives and they have survivor's guilt, or we did and we came home and there's still people dying in these places, and we still feel service connected to them. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but we still feel connected to them. We've lost friends, we've lost acquaintances on missions, and we put ourselves in their spot, and wow, does that hurt, and we're meant to process through that hurt.
I feel like the best analogy I can come up with as a civilian is this is your family. Your brothers and sisters that bleed green are your family members.
Right.
And when you separate from them to go back home,
You're leaving your family behind.
you're leaving some family behind in a place where there's trouble. And I know when I've lost family how much that deeply hurts me.
Yes, you do.
And how sad I get.
Doesn't everyone lose someone? And the point and the fundamental thing is you are deeply grieved and sad, and you're meant to process that grief. Not in 10 minutes, not in check in and check out.
Right.
Come back to the mission. It's sadness. There might not be, for some people, a light at the end of the tunnel. It's a journey through it. It's like a language you need to learn. You don't just go to Spain and pick up a language. No, you actually have to sit in it and learn that language. Grief is the same way. You're on a journey to learn that grief language. Without doing it, we're stuck in a cycle of this survivor's guilt. Everybody loses someone. You're meant to just grieve through that. Most veterans struggle right there because you're not taught in the military how to learn that language.
So this is a perfect segue as far as survivor's guilt and the language of survivor's guilt. And if I'm a veteran or not even a veteran, actually, we just communicated how you could be a service member home
Yep.
for the holidays and something horrific happens overseas. How does one, what are the resources available, and what is the language, and what are the tools that worked for you, I guess? Let's put it in story form. In story form, what have you seen other veterans do at Cape Ann Veteran Services, right? So I guess let's start with you, Dave, because you were just talking about the language that works for you.
Right.
In your survivor's guilt, because you said you have worked on it a lot. And I've seen it personally,
So
actually.
I keep saying on every one of these, that retreat, people are terrified to heal. People are terrified to shine a light on a memory that might really cut them to the core, because then they have to feel it again. Or some of them are not even feeling it. I was done doing that because it's what brought me to my knees, and a lot of my trauma after the fact was not processing any of it. Me going to these retreat centers and having people educate me on just the language of moral injury, survivor's guilt. I have to hear it, and then they define it and break it down with language was helpful for me. But then them saying, now, do you have any of that? Do you have anyone you lost overseas? Anyone close to you? Anything you've seen? They might not have even been close. Did you witness any innocent people dying? Yes, yes, yes. Check the box on all of them for us at war. Then they said, tell us about it. And they sat there and listened. And that, me getting that darkness or pain inside out into the open in a safe community of people was helpful for me. I got the education because they provided language. Then I was able to use that language and tell my story. And then as you get it out over time, it just felt better, physically felt better. Emotionally and mentally, I was able to now talk about my traumas. And it became a discipline over time where I can just now talk about anything and it comes out in the same way. Those retreat centers were so important for me personally. A lot of people are terrified when they hear, well, one, retreat. Do we retreat and surrender in the military? Those words.
Oh, interesting.
How about we regroup, go to a center together and heal in community? You don't even need to call it retreat. How about we just come in community and talk about some pretty cool stories and I just listen? So I love the veterans of war. Not even, you don't have to be from war. If you're a veteran that served in any way, you can come to these retreats. And we just sit there and tell stories. And over time, you start hearing them. Someone could sit there and not say a word. They're outside of the groups. You could see their chair pulled outside. They're in a corner watching the groups. Over time, eventually, they're in the circle. I've witnessed this with many veterans. And then they're the ones telling the story. And no one judges them. We sit there and just say, thank you. That seems really hard.
Yeah.
And thank you for coming. Welcome home.
Yeah.
When the Vietnam veterans hear the words, welcome home, I watch them weep sometimes. They were never told, welcome home. They never felt it. They isolated. Now, 50 years later, when they hear and you look in their eyes, welcome home, just those words break them down sometimes.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like I've heard a similar story with your coffee socials, where you'll have veterans that have been going to the coffee socials for a long time and are sharing stories, the banter, and you might have someone off to the side that's just watching, and that's okay for them just to watch.
Yep, it's okay for them to watch. So you hit up on a keyword, community, when you were just speaking, and I think that has a lot to do with what we continue to advocate for, is to serve not only the community but serve the veterans as a community, right? So we offer the coffee socials as a means for our community to network with one another, whether or not you're open enough to put yourself out there, whether or not you know this community in particular or not. The coffee socials offer an outlet. They offer an option for you to go in and get to know some of this community, some of this veteran community that has walked in your boots, right? They understand what you've been through. You don't have to engage right away. You can listen in, and I've had this time and again. New veterans to the area or new to the coffee socials listen in for 1 or 2 coffees. They initiate conversations with someone else. Something someone else says to them triggers an emotional response. And they come to our office, or they call me into the office and say, can we share a couple words? And I can kind of just continue to talk to them or listen to their story, right? So I allow them the space to open up as much or as little as they wish to do so, but I allow them the space to put it out there on the table. I'm not a salesperson, right? I'm not a businessman. I'm not here to sell you a claims filing, but I am here to help you as a friend, as a peer, what services are out there and how to help you navigate these services. And oftentimes it may take 2 or 3 visits, but a lot of these gentlemen do come back and say, you know what? After one of your coffee socials, I've been thinking, I think I do have this condition, or I do suffer from some sort of post-traumatic stress or anxiety or something. What can I do about it? And so the first thing is, you can talk to someone about it. These are the resources to help you learn coping mechanisms, help you learn to deal with what it is that you are feeling, because you've put this in the back of your mind for 50 plus years. You never relived whatever happened to you overseas, right? This is a part of your memory that you really compartmentalized, and you came home and you went about your business, you went about your life to make sure that your family and your friends were all taken care of. You put that all in the back. So it is just now resurfacing.
Right.
This is all, these feelings, these emotions are just now coming to life. So I'm going to help connect you, because I'm not a clinician, right? I
Right.
know about trauma because I have that lived in experience, but I'm going to connect you with these services and these resources. They can help you navigate what you are feeling. But I'm going to also connect you and make sure that you are accessing all of the services and all of the benefits that you are entitled to. And I know we spoke on entitlement, before the cameras were rolling, but I know entitlement is a hard word, but it is the reality. You are entitled to these services. You are entitled to these benefits, whether they are monetary benefits or physical services that the VA has to offer you. You earn that, regardless of whether you are in country, regardless of whether or not you are wartime or not. These are services that you are entitled to, that you deserve,
That's right.
that you earned, and that you should be accessing.
And the government sets it aside for us, and if we don't use it, it
Yes.
will get allocated somewhere else.
Yes. So if not us,
Let's use
then
it.
who?
That's right.
Go
We
ahead
have to
and
use it.
Right. By you ensuring by that these services are still being used, you're securing their future. You're securing the longevity of their existence. Right. By Vietnam, World War II, I'm going backwards in time here,
yeah.
but by all of these previous generations, by them accessing and using up these services, you're ensuring that you and I's generations are afforded the same benefits. And then by us taking advantage of these services,
Right.
we're ensuring that the future generations have entitlements, right? Have
Yeah.
access to these services. If we don't use them, they will be allocated elsewhere. They will be obsolete.
use them, right.
They disappear.
Right.
So why not take
V
advantage?
brought up a word that most veterans might not even understand, because it's usually a psychology word. She said trigger. They'll sit there at a coffee social, hear something, and they'll get triggered. Well, what does that mean? Because we know what a trigger is when we have a gun and we pull it with our finger.
Yeah.
As a civilian and as a veteran, when you're there and you're around community and you hear a story, like V heard something today that I said, she goes, you brought me back to a memory when I was over there and a family member had a medical condition. War is not normal. 17, 18, 19, whatever the age is, when we experience war, we're trained for it, but what you experience over there is not normal to the human brain, the human body, but we are in it for so long, it becomes normalized to us. So now take us outside of that wartime and put us in a civilian world here in Gloucester, Massachusetts. Our mind, our brain, our body, everything is there now in a really different state than it once was. The brain, the circuit board has burnt out in a way from what we saw over there. It was an abnormal situation we experienced, but it was normalized to us because we lived it so long. So here we are in community, and this guy over here can talk. This Vietnam vet has been going to the coffee socials for 8 years, telling a war story. I sit there on the outside and I hear it. It triggers something in me. I feel a physical effect, or I have a memory pop through my head of those times I'm being triggered. It's like a root connected to that time at war. And I'm feeling the effects of it now at a coffee social. That's a trigger. And it's a normal reaction to have a trigger, because it's showing our body and our mind, I need to heal. You've stuffed it away too long. It's time to heal from this. And that's what the trigger means for most veterans. They're walking around as a walking trigger, because your body is telling you, I can't do this anymore. I can't pack it away behind your heart, behind your mind. I'm physically struggling. I can't isolate. I don't want to drink booze anymore. I don't want to numb with this. And healing community is what it's telling you. That's what a trigger is. So these veterans that don't know what's happening to them, that's what's happening.
And so a trigger happens, and someone feels that that overwhelming physical effect is what it sounds like.
Sure.
And I'm sure for Yeah, but that must be scary.
It's
If you're
terrifying.
not sure of what's happening, and all of a sudden you're just like,
It is. It is. I mean,
Yeah.
I've had someone be triggered at the coffee, right? I'm not given any information here on who, but someone was triggered at the coffee. They did not come to me immediately. Someone else did and said, hey, I just spoke with someone and they kind of broke down a little bit. Keep an eye on them. And that's exactly what I do, right? I'm not going to call you out when you're not ready to speak. I will allow you the space to open up when you are comfortable speaking, but I will keep an eye on you. And when you are ready, and we were fortunate enough that we were able to establish a level of commonality
Yeah.
and trust with one another, that they did open up. And, you know, the first visit was just that. It was them popping into the office and say, hey, I don't know what I'm feeling. And I explained to them what they're feeling and how that's normal. And then
Beautiful.
storm off. That's acceptable,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You don't know how to respond to the
right.
information I'm just sharing with you, right? Because to you, this is a new experience. Again, remember, you compartmentalized
Yeah.
this emotion and this response to the back of your brain. So you have absolutely no idea how to respond to it. So I'm explaining to you what it is,
Right.
and then you take the time that you need to cope and kind of just understand for yourself
Yeah.
what you are experiencing.
Processing it.
Yeah. And then, you know, another visit came by and they stood there a little longer, opened up a little bit more. And these aren't unscheduled visits. You just walk right in and you felt like you needed to speak and
Yeah.
my door is open. Come right on in. Let's talk. And I'm still going to continue to allow you as much time as you actually need.
Yeah.
And every single time you come in, I'm going to give you the number to the resources to someone who is qualified enough to help you navigate this. My door is still going to be open. I'm still going to listen to you, but I want you to deal with a trained professional to actually help you navigate what is happening.
great.
And every single time they came in, I'd hand them over that same number,
Right.
that same number, and that same number. And it finally took someone else handing them that same number for them to circle back and say, is this the same person? Yeah, this is the same person.
Such a
Okay,
good
I think I'm
story,
going to
yeah.
connect.
I
think
love
I'm gonna
this
connect with
story.
them.
Yes, me
Yeah.
too.
And like as you were talking, the first thing that came to my mind was how it started at the coffee social, a very just
Very
casual environment, having coffee,
Yep.
stories being told. Someone had an effect, and another community member.
Yeah.
It's almost like you had your own little platoon there.
We do. That's exactly. Well, we're a community. We police up after each other, and we notice when someone is missing, right? We have our regulars, and then we have some individuals who pop in once or twice a month, and that's okay. We kind of get to understand and memorize the trends of who's coming in and who's coming out, who's brand new to the group, who's not being themselves in the group, and we police after each other.
Yeah.
We really, really do. It is a community. We're family, right? I share zero blood relation to anyone in that room, yet we are family.
We all
And
bleed
when
green.
one person is off, they let us know. They let us know
Yeah,
such and such
community.
hasn't been here.
Keep coming back to it. It's community.
It's community.
You know, what can some of the effects of being triggered? I mean, you just heard a story about it. We can start to tunnel vision and just hyper focus on one thing. Your heart rate goes up. You can begin to can't breathe. You just start losing your breath. You get a pain like a boulder on your chest. Sometimes a knife feeling in your gut, your stomach. It's like someone is internally cutting you. Auditory exclusion. You stop to hear. Your body is really struggling. Mentally, you're struggling. You don't understand. It's like a fog of war because you had it over there. Now your body's processing it in your mind. And these are just some of the effects. It can hit you in so many different ways.
So many.
Sometimes the guy or the woman just needs to hear someone like V put it into language for them, and they storm off, go, no, not me. No, this isn't happening.
I've had tons of people storm off. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a minute. And it's funny because I spoke with Brian was speaking with me the other day. Brian is our assistant at the office, and he goes, "How are you so patient with people?" And I said, "You don't. One, there's no reason to be extra, right? There's no need to go overexert yourself because how is that helping the
Yeah,
cause?
how's that helpful? Right.
Right. How is that helping the cause? And then you also have to understand you have to have a little extra patience with people because we're all dealing with some sort of mental illness, or whether we want to admit it or not, we are.
Someone
that
had
is the
patience with us, didn't they?
Right.
Someone had patience on us.
Exactly. Someone had
Right.
patience on us. So yes, I should afford them my patience so that I can allow them the space to lay it all out.
Yeah.
Because I can't help them if I'm impatient myself.
Right. Because
Right?
we're already explosive, right? We were trained a certain way to go from 0 to 100 because the mission or whatever happened went from 0 to 100. The situation went from 0 to 100. So we reactively go 0 to 100. Come back home, we can be 0 to 100 in anger, explosiveness. Like this is part of
Right.
that spectrum we talk about
Right.
of veterans getting out. And so we're just trying to navigate, well, how do I plug into this place with people who don't understand, people who have not walked in my boots, people that have not experienced combat? How do I do this? Well, in this community, you can plug into this community if you so choose to and walk with us. And you can storm off, go 0 to 100 and come back.
Yeah.
But just please come back.
Yeah.
Keep coming back.
Yeah.
Right.
For the veterans, just come back to the community, you know?
Yeah.
And so, how would you describe your coffee socials and just like the vibe as a whole? Do you feel like there's a mission behind your coffee socials? What would you say is the mission of your coffee socials? Your purpose. You know, they all come every Friday.
Yeah, I feel as if our mission is acceptance, right? This is somewhere where you can come in, and despite the banter that they have back and forth, these are still your brothers and sisters, and they understand what your experiences have been. And this is the one place where you can come in, and again, despite the banter, is a judgment-free zone, right? You are accepted, despite. I have to say that because
There is some judgment. The
there,
banter.
well, it's the difference in political views and the differences in religion and all of the
Everything.
things that are not to be said at a dinner table is said at a coffee social. But you're still accepted for who you are, right? Because we have that commonality of service.
Fee, does everyone get along there?
Yeah.
You know, look at the platoons and the companies we were part of.
I
You're
was
a
just going to make
family.
that analogy.
Your
Yeah.
personalities are so different from different parts of the city, but in the military, different parts of the country, we didn't get along all the time.
Yeah.
Some people are butting heads all of the time. That's family, by the way.
Right.
It's a different
It
type
is.
of family.
Everyone's
and
entitled
that's
to
right.
their own views. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion. And everyone is also entitled to openly have conversations, right? Because these are conversations that are so taboo to have, right?
That's right.
They're not allowed at the dinner table. They're not allowed in front of family members who have opposing views.
Right.
But if not here, then where? And so now you're just keeping this in, and all of this stuff is going to continue to be bottled
Right.
up
And
until when you
explode till you
explode.
explode. Right.
These guys know, at 9 o'clock a.m., they're going to get everything out on the table.
Yeah,
At 10 o'clock, they're back to loving each other, and they're going grocery
good,
shopping
too.
afterwards.
And it feels good to not have it inside to where you're going to explode. When you lay it on the table and then an hour goes by and you're like, why do I feel like okay? Well, that's part of the process of what you did. You processed the language and got it
Yes.
out on the table.
Yeah.
It's part of it.
We're doing God's work, I want to say,
Yeah.
okay? Because we are allowing a space for these, and I'm going to say gentlemen because it's the majority are men, okay?
Yeah.
We're allowing a space for these men to come and talk to one another and get out that testosterone, and spouses, you're welcome.
Yeah. Well, when they come home to you better men.
So, being the youngest of like the clan,
Their spouses
That's
don't
so
have to hear it.
Right. It's so fun.
whenever
they
you would
bring
come
me
home,
cookies.
whenever you would come home from deployment, right? So you'd have some R&R, you'd come home,
Right.
And on many occasions, you had service members come to the house.
I did.
On many occasions,
I had friends
and
come.
that banter,
Yes.
and that poking,
It's all friendly.
there was almost a love behind
It
it.
is.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to describe
Right.
it. That there was always a smile behind the
Yes.
banter.
Yes,
Right.
there's always a smile. There's
Right.
always laughing. There's always poking fun.
And there can be anger too.
And it
Sometimes
works
it was-
both ways.
Right?
Mostly smiles.
It's just you don't take it to an unhealthy level, right, where it's
Yeah,
dangerous.
yeah.
Because there's also that part. We want veterans to understand too that there is unhealthy coping.
Yeah.
Or this is positive, healthy coping to do it in community where you and other people can still hold someone accountable
Yep.
if they're off,
Yep.
mentally off, if they're thinking differently, if they want to harm themselves or harm someone else. That's where we step in and really say, well, we need to bring you to a professional to process through this, because there is that. We have the eye for unhealthy coping because, one, we've walked it and we've seen so many walk it. So we want to guide them to the resources that will help them in the mental struggles, mental illness, addiction problems, all of it. So that's part of it too. That's why we need to be close to them and them stay close to us and show up.
I think what sets us apart from a lot of other communities, one, we live in the same community that we serve. So we know these men and women at a personal level. We know what their home life is like. We know their spouses. We know their children. We see them walking through the grocery stores. We know them. That's not the same with other communities. And I often hear other people or other individuals reaching out to us consistently. Why do your coffee socials work so well? Or how are they so successful? You know, I'm lucky if I get 2 guys to come to our coffee socials. Well, one, it's offered in the community that I also reside in.
Right.
So these men know my personal life, which can be good and bad, but it's the reality of what we do. But 2, they know each other. And again, it's offered in a community in which they live in.
Right.
They grew up. Gloucester is unique in itself,
It's an
right?
island.
Yeah, it's an island.
island.
Everyone knows everyone's business. Everyone knows everybody's related to someone in some way, shape, or form. And that's the beauty of our coffee socials, is if we have one veteran who comes and they know that their cousin was also a veteran, they might enjoy it, and they tell them, oh, this is what we do, or this is what V provides us with, and the donuts are great, and come on over, and they'll bring them in, and that's how our coffees continue to grow, and that's how our coffees continue to be successful, because they police up after themselves or each other.
And they just need to show up, go into Gloucester Veteran Services, go talk to V, because if a coffee social doesn't work for you, V's going to find
There's
a
other
different
outlets.
resource. Maybe it's one-on-one attention that they need to not just have banter involved, but they need someone that's a therapist or something in the VA that they can help.
Yeah, definitely help. We would definitely connect you with some sort of clinical services. But we'd also assist you in finding alternate outlets, right? We just got approved for a grant for Warrior Within Project, and I
Wow,
know
I
you're
don't know
huge.
this one.
Yeah, you know I'm huge with the yoga and meditation and all that good stuff, because that's what really worked for me in learning and understanding what I was feeling. But we were recently granted a grant to get Warrior Within approved here in our area, and these are free yoga classes that are offered to veterans and first responders.
I saw that.
So
First
it's
responders,
open
police,
to
fire.
police, fire, and their spouses as well. Free of charge. And for Gloucester right now, it's still a pilot program. For other communities, it has been long running. But I've noticed individuals that I would have never thought would attend these practices, attend them.
Okay.
And so
They're
I'm
showing
okay
up.
with that.
Yeah, they're showing up.
Just showing up, and showing up is half the battle. So more power to you, man. I'm proud of you.
Yeah, right. Just show up.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's one outlet. We do the flag football game, and it's not necessarily an outlet, but it's community, right? It's a resource that we offer locally to fellow comrades, to fellow service members, to kind of just connect with one another. It may be the only time we see one another, and the entire year might be the only time we see each other, but again, we have that banter on the field, and we leave it at the field. But it's just a fun night where we get to hang out and, be old grunts again.
That's it, because coming together. I remember early on when we started the podcast, we had a letter from Bulldog. Bulldog was a Vietnam vet who isolated for 40, 50 years. He did go to the retreat I've been talking about, but what he said on our weekly Zoom session, this right here, because we're from all over the country, so we have to do it by Zoom. It's like a coffee social, if you will. It's 9 a.m., but it's done by Zoom. He says, this right here, the aftercare of this group and what you guys mean to me and what we talk about is what's what's healing me.
Mm-hmm.
Just getting together to share when it's hard or to just laugh when it's good.
Yeah.
But no matter, it's that journey doing it together. He said, this getting with you guys in the morning is what's important to me and what's healing me.
They found purpose.
Yeah.
They found purpose, and the purpose is to make sure that they're at that call.
Yeah.
Every morning or every week or whatever the case may be.
Right.
There's
That's
something
it.
to gathering. There's something to it. Just gathering,
Right.
just being present,
Yeah.
keeping the expectations wherever you need them
That's
to be.
right.
There's just something to
men
it.
and women, when you think you don't need anyone, when you say, I'm good in isolation, I'm sorry.
You're not.
I was in that place too, and I think it's a lie that we've either been told or believed, but you do need community.
For a short time, right? I know there are some individuals who need to be alone with their
Yes.
thoughts to process
Yeah,
them.
that's
That
right.
is understandable,
Right.
right? So there is a difference between having time to process your thoughts and feelings,
Yeah.
and then there's isolation. And isolation is what's unhealthy.
right.
When you, or that alone time that you seek becomes
Right.
repetitive, when it becomes a trait or a characteristic that you live by now. Now you're by yourself with your own thoughts and only
be
your own
dangerous.
thoughts. And if you know anything about trauma, when you live through a traumatic experience, you continue to relive that
loop.
memory in your mind. But each time you relive that memory in that mind, you're remembering a detail. But is it really a detail that happened, or is it a detail that you implanted or transplanted
Right.
into that memory? Is it a real memory? When you're isolated, you start to believe things
Yeah,
that you're
that
not
might not
quite
have
sure,
happened.
right?
Yeah.
Might
Yeah.
not have happened,
right.
or it might not have happened in that manner. You're just interpreting that had happened because that is how you felt.
Right.
But what you are feeling through a traumatic experience is different than what someone else is feeling through a traumatic experience. And so,
Yeah.
again, isolation is not healthy. And
That's
then
right.
isolation can lead to substance use or self-medication, and it's not good.
Self-sabotage, right.
Self-sabotage.
Yeah.
And I feel like actually there's also, gathering might be a little too broad of a stroke too, because gathering without like going to your coffee socials, there's a purpose, right? Whereas for some people, gathering on the holidays actually can be very difficult,
Oh, yeah.
or
It can be a trigger.
it can be a trigger in a negative way, right? You know, so maybe there's more to that as well. Kind of bringing this full circle to the holiday, how I thought we were going to start, which I love this. It makes me like think about, oh, is that why Joe Rogan does like 2 or 3 hour podcasts? Because they just end up winding and
Absolutely,
weaving
yeah.
all over the place, which is great. I
We
love
thought
this.
we had an agenda here, and we went way off of what we actually wrote down. Yeah. And
But
that's
to bring
okay.
it back to that, bring it back to the holiday conversation
Yeah.
is, if someone is gathering just for the sake of gathering, at the detriment of their well-being, right? Kind of like what we were talking about earlier about some of this.
Right.
Well,
There
let's
might
use an
be gathering
example.
for a good purpose.
In the military world or the veteran world, we have something called Memorial Day. I don't want to celebrate like Americans do Memorial Day and do Doritos and Bud Light and have a party on Memorial Day. That's not what I want
right.
to do.
Right.
I take a kayak and go into the middle of the ocean or a lake to not isolate, but to get alone to process the
process.
men who have lost their lives that I know and love.
Exactly.
And that's my Memorial Day. I go and I have some grieving sessions as I journal and think about the men who have lost their lives. I want to take that day to really process through. And I don't process through the men losing their lives every day of my life. I'm not in a loop anymore like I used to be. But I take that day to really focus on my best buds. And I do it in a kayak, in a journal, and that's okay. And then I come back to community once I process over the days. That's my Memorial Day. I
Right.
don't like to celebrate it like the country might celebrate Memorial
Absolutely.
Day.
Yeah.
And that's a holiday for those who've lost their lives.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there's something to it. So I guess kind of to transition here as far as, if being a part of a community, a unit that's local here to Cape Ann, check out the coffee socials and be expected to have some camaraderie, be expected that there's going to be some wild banter, but also some awesome stories
Yep.
and some awesome community that can happen. And if any of this language that Dave is using, and V is using, as far as processing and triggers,
Yeah.
if you have any questions about any of that, email us at the second longest email on the planet.
Can you even say it? Say
What
it.
is the first?
Bridging the Gap Vets Podcast at gmail.com.
You say it so good.
I mean, I was the one
better
that,
than I did.
dude, I was searching Gmail for like available podcasts.
Right.
It was just so hard. So maybe we could come up with one sometime.
Yeah.
But Bridging the Gap Vets Podcast at gmail.com. And if you have any questions about language or community or processing or resources available,
Or coffee socials.
or if you just want a cup of coffee.
They are a national entity now, so that you can find a coffee social from the East Coast to West Coast.
Yeah.
And if any of this resonated and you'd like to share your story, start with that email as well. We'd love to hear your story in that email. And we would be interested in talking to anyone and just helping to continue this mission of quieting the stigma.
Yep. And we love you. Don't hurt yourself. Don't do that. Get in touch with us. Hurting yourself or anyone else is not the answer. Come talk to us, and we'll find a better way. There's always a better way than that.
So I think this is a good time to close Bridging the
Yes,
Gap
yes.
Podcast 2025. We're
Yes.
getting this ball rolling
Good
here.
job, everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank
that
you
was
all.
different.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.